The phone buzzed again. Jake didn't answer. He couldn't. Not with his heart racing like this, not with sweat pooling under his shirt, even though the office AC was blasting. He stared at the email still open on his screen. Subject line, performance review follow-up. But the words blurred, meaningless shapes. He closed the laptop with a loud snap. Then the whisper came again. "You're blowing it." "Look at you." It sounded like him. It was him. That same voice he'd heard his whole life. Not out loud, no, not schizophrenic. Just that internal narrator. The one that always came around when things slipped. He rubbed his face, dug the heels of his palms into his eyes. Get it together, man. He told himself he was just tired. Just a bad week. But the truth was harder to face. He hadn't felt right in months. Maybe years, he muttered. His office overlooked the Hudson. On better days, the view meant something. Today, it looked like a giant exit sign. Jake stood, grabbed his coat, though it was mid-April and already warm, and walked out. He didn't say goodbye to anyone. No one noticed. The hallway smelled like toner and coffee. The elevator dinged once and he stepped in. He pulled out his phone and opened YouTube, the only thing lately that could halfway numb the panic. His algorithm had gotten weird. A mix of tech reviews, amateur therapy, and spiritual TED Talks. He never clicked those, but they kept showing up. As the elevator descended, he clicked on one. "Talk to yourself like this for just 3 days," the title read. A calm British voice filled his ears. Rupert Sheldrake, PhD in biochemistry, turned consciousness explorer, said the caption. "You can literally change your biology by shifting the tone of your internal dialogue." Jake almost laughed. Then he didn't, he just listened. "Imagine," the voice continued, "if instead of rehearsing self-doubt, you rehearsed compassion. What if for 3 days you spoke to yourself like someone you deeply loved, not just positively, lovingly?" Jake blinked hard. The elevator doors opened, Wall Street noises spilled in, horns, footsteps, an argument over who had the right of way. He walked. The voice stayed with him, inside the AirPods, but deeper too. What if for 3 days you didn't attack yourself? Jake turned the corner onto Water Street. His heart still thudded, but something in him, a tiny, almost embarrassed part, whispered back, "Okay, I'll try." Not out loud, but still. It was the first time in years he'd answered himself with something kind. 3 days. Just 3 days. He could try that. Jake didn't go home right away. Instead, he wandered into a quiet corner of Battery Park and sat on a bench facing the harbor. The wind off the water carried that faint salt smell that reminded him of childhood vacations in Cape Cod, back when things were simpler, before everything became performance reviews and panic attacks. The video had ended 10 minutes ago, but its words clung to him. Not the British guy's voice exactly, but the idea behind it. Talk to yourself like someone you deeply love. He stared out at the Statue of Liberty. Lit by the late afternoon sun, she looked tired too. Jake pulled out his phone again. His thumb hovered over the video history. He tapped it, watched again, paused this time, rewound. Took mental notes. There were 3 rules Sheldrake had listed. No insults, even joking ones. Every self-directed thought must be something you'd say to a scared child. Say it out loud when you're alone. Jake chuckled bitterly. Rule number 2 hit too close. A scared child, huh? That's not far off. He pressed his fingers to his temple. "All right," he muttered. "Let's give this a shot." A jogger passed by, but he waited until the coast was clear. Then quietly, almost mockingly, he whispered, "You're doing your best. That's good enough right now." He winced. It felt foreign, ridiculous, embarrassing, even with no one around. But something cracked, not a big crack, just a hairline fracture in the usual script. The one that said, "You're lazy, you're falling behind, you're screwing up your life." Jake leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He didn't say anything for a while. Just listened to the lapping of the waves and the hum of the city behind him. Then he whispered again, "You're not weak. You're tired." He looked down at his worn sneakers. He'd had them for years, bought them during a manic productivity phase where he thought running might solve everything. "You've been trying to fix this alone." That one hurt, but also, it helped. His phone buzzed again. It was Ben, his best friend since college, the guy he hadn't texted back in a month. The message was short. "Hey, you alive?" Jake stared at it. He tapped back a reply. "Yeah. Kinda? Can I call you tonight?" 3 dots appeared. "Please do." Jake put the phone away. A breeze ruffled his coat. He took a deep breath, leaned back on the bench, and said quietly, not sarcastically this time, "You're doing okay. Today's enough." It didn't fix anything. His job was still unstable, his sleep still trash, but it felt like standing up in a room where he'd been curled in a corner. And that mattered. Jake stared at himself in the bathroom mirror. It was early, earlier than usual. He'd woken without the usual dread pressing on his chest like a stone. Not peace exactly, but space, enough to breathe. He ran the faucet, splashed water on his face, and looked again. Hair messy, eyes a little bloodshot, skin pale under the fluorescent light. He looked like someone who didn't quite believe in mornings. Sheldrake's voice from yesterday echoed in his mind. "Say it out loud when you're alone." Jake sighed. "Okay, let's be weird." He leaned in slightly, eye to eye with himself, and said, "You're safe." His voice caught a little. It sounded awkward, but not as ridiculous as yesterday. "You're allowed to take up space." Then, just because it hurt to say it, he added, "You don't have to earn love." That one stung. He turned away, toweled off. The rules felt unnatural, like trying to walk differently after years of limping. But he kept at it. He'd promised himself 3 days, just 3. In the kitchen, he made toast, letting the smell of burnt edges and butter settle into the apartment. It reminded him of mornings with his mom when he was a kid, before things got complicated. She used to hum when she cooked. Jake found himself humming too. A low, tuneless hum, but it filled the silence. The phone lit up again. A new message from Ben. "8 p.m. dinner still good?" Jake smiled. "Yeah. Looking forward to it." That was new, meaning it. Most of the time, social things made him tired before they even began. But not today. Not exactly. He took his toast to the tiny desk in the corner of his apartment, opened his laptop. The review email was still there, unopened. His finger hovered over the trackpad. Then he heard it again, the internal voice. But something had shifted. Not the harshness he was used to, more like a nudge. "You can handle this, you're more than one bad week." Jake blinked. It wasn't like he didn't still feel the fear, but it wasn't running the whole show. Not today. He opened the email, read it. It wasn't glowing, but it wasn't the doom he'd imagined either. Phrases like "room for growth" and "recalibrate priorities" made his stomach clench, but even that was manageable. He didn't spiral, didn't punch the desk or curse himself. Instead, he closed the laptop and whispered, "Proud of you." It felt stupid. It also felt real. He left for work 15 minutes early, walked instead of taking the subway. The sky was low and grey, but the air felt clean. Cold spring clean. A man on the corner handed out free samples of protein bars. Jake took one, smiled, and kept walking. Somewhere deep in the static of his thoughts, he heard it again. "You're doing better than you think." Jake almost turned back twice before reaching the restaurant. It wasn't fancy, just a quiet Indian place in the East Village, the kind with soft lighting and mismatched silverware. But sitting across from someone who knew you, someone who could see through a fake smile in a second, felt like walking into a spotlight. Ben was already there, same leather jacket from college, same half smirk that said, "I know something's up, but I'll wait till you're ready." "You look alive," Ben said, handing over a menu. Jake laughed. "It's the curry glow, you know me." But Ben didn't smile back. "You vanished for a month, man." "I know." Jake looked down, fidgeted with his fork. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to explain everything right then, wasn't sure he could. Ben poured them both water. "You doing okay?" And then it happened. That same script in his head tried to fire up. Lie, say you're fine, make a joke, pivot to work stuff. But something in him rebelled. He remembered Rule 2. Speak to yourself like you would to a scared child. What would that child want to say right now? "I'm not great," Jake said softly. "But I'm..." Trying. Ben nodded like he'd been expecting that. That's a real answer. They ordered food. Jake barely remembered what. Something with lentils and spice and warmth. The kind of dish that lingered on your lips and slowed your thoughts. As they ate, he told Ben a little, not everything, but enough. About the stress, the silence, the nights when the walls felt too close. And then about the video. Ben blinked. You're doing self-talk therapy? Jake shrugged. 3-day experiment. Some British guy convinced me it's weird, but not as stupid as I thought it'd be. Ben smiled, not mockingly. I've done weirder. You remember when I did that silent retreat in the Catskills? Jake snorted. You lasted 12 hours. Yeah, but the food was amazing. They both laughed. For the first time in weeks, Jake laughed without guilt attached to it. Not the kind that hides pain, the kind that releases it. As they walked out later into the chilly spring night, Jake hesitated. Hey, he said, stopping under a street lamp. Thanks for not pushing, for just letting me talk. Ben clapped a hand on his shoulder. Always, but next time don't disappear. You're not a ghost, Jake. I felt like one. Ben nodded. Then let's haunt each other. Keeps us honest. Jake smiled. Walking home, the city felt less like a cage and more like a map. The people around him weren't threats, just other humans, carrying their own invisible weight. He said it again, quietly, just for himself. You're not alone. This time he almost believed it. Sunday mornings in New York had their own rhythm, slower, softer. No car horns, no shouts. Just the hum of buses and the occasional clatter of a delivery cart rolling over pavement cracks. Jake sat on the Q train, headed to Prospect Park. No real reason, just air and maybe a bench in the sun. Something about quiet trees and open space had started to sound like medicine. The train swayed, and Jake caught his reflection in the window. He looked tired but lighter, like someone coming up for air after a long dive. His phone buzzed. A calendar reminder. Day 3. Talk to yourself like you love you. He smiled. Cringed a little too, but smiled. 3 days ago, the idea of speaking gently to himself felt like a performance. Now it felt possible. He pulled out his earbuds and tapped play on the last part of the Sheldrake series. The voice returned calm and precise. On day 3, notice the change, not just in your thoughts, but in how you react to those thoughts. Has your tone shifted? Your posture? Your breath? Jake took a slow inhale. Yeah, actually, it had. At Prospect Park, he walked until the trees thickened and the skyline disappeared. Found a bench near the lake and sat. Ducks drifted by like they didn't owe the world anything. For the first time in a long while, Jake didn't reach for his phone. He let himself think. The thoughts came, sure, at the usual suspects. What if I fail? What if this peace doesn't last? What if Monday crushes me again? But the voice he'd been practicing showed up too. It wasn't loud, just steady. It's okay to be unsure. You're still showing up. He didn't fight the fear. He let it sit beside him, like a visitor, not a master. Nearby, a little girl chased a pigeon with wild, shrieking joy. Her father watched, laughing softly. Jake smiled at them, then looked away quickly, embarrassed by how moved he felt. He thought about calling his mom. They hadn't talked in weeks, not because of a fight, just inertia. He dialed. It rang twice before she answered, voice groggy. Jake? Hey, Mom. Oh, baby, everything okay? Yeah, I just wanted to hear your voice. A pause. Well, that's a nice surprise. They talked for 10 minutes, about nothing really. But it was enough. She didn't ask heavy questions. He didn't spill everything, but the space between them warmed a little. After he hung up, Jake stood and stretched. The sun had shifted. A breeze moved through the trees. He whispered, just for himself, "You're trying, and that counts." Not a mantra, not magic, just the truth. Monday came like it always did, without asking permission. The alarm buzzed at 7 a.m., slicing through the quiet. Jake lay still for a moment, blinking at the ceiling, but instead of the familiar dread, there was something else. Not joy, but readiness. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and sat up, breathed, reached for his phone, but not to check work emails. He opened the Notes app instead. At the top of the screen was a new habit he'd typed out the night before: morning check-in. What do I feel? What do I need? What can I say to myself that's kind and true? Jake typed, feel, nervous but steady, need, patience, coffee, a walk, kind, truth, you're allowed to be human at work. He stared at the words, then nodded. The weekend hadn't cured him, he hadn't found enlightenment, but the inner voice and the one he used to weaponize against himself had changed. It wasn't fully kind yet, not always, but it was quieter, gentler, less cruel, and that was something. He walked to work. No headphones, just city sounds, trash trucks groaning, early commuters muttering into coffee lids, a dog barking at pigeons. Life in all its uneven rhythm. As he passed a bakery on 23rd, he stopped, bought a croissant, sat on the stoop outside and ate it slowly, letting the buttery flakes stick to his fingers. He thought about the past 3 days. What had actually changed? Not his job, not his inbox, not his anxiety, not completely, but something subtle, a shift, like learning how to hold a heavy object with both hands instead of dragging it behind you. He remembered something Sheldrake had said in that first video. You've spoken to yourself your whole life. You just never chose the tone. Now you can. Jake looked down the street. Same city, same noise, but now a different script. A woman passed by and gave him a brief, curious smile. He nodded back, didn't flinch, didn't wonder if he looked weird, didn't second guess whether he was taking up too much sidewalk space or breathing wrong. He stood, dusted crumbs from his shirt, and kept walking. At the crosswalk, he whispered it again, not because the rule said so, but because he wanted to. You're not broken, you're becoming. And he meant it. It wasn't the end of a story, just the beginning of one he was finally willing to tell, to himself first, and maybe someday to someone else.